All right, so welcome back for here, the second part of the kind of second stage here. What we're going to want to do is kind of refine the forms a little bit more. Again, always kind of keep focusing and keep double checking on the relationships of things as you're working, but now we'll also start to lay in a little bit of tone here. Again, the idea here is not going to be to finish it in this pass, but to start to, just like we build up the relationships of the forms, we also want to build up some of the relationships of the values or the tone. So I'll start to kind of build those up, and it'll be loose here at the beginning. But again, I want to start to build up the relationships between the values, right? I could, my darkest dark could be made using an 8B, or it could be made using a 2H, right? Those values are very far apart from one another, but if the value structure within the drawing remains consistent, then a 2H can in fact be the darkest part, or an 8B could be the darkest part. But kind of on the flip side of that, both of those decisions, or either of those choices, will affect the kind of mood or atmosphere of the drawing, right? So even if a 2H serves as the darkest part, that drawing is going to appear much lighter than one in which the darkest value is an 8B, right? Additionally, using, going from, a 6H, or even using white chalk as highlight all the way to an 8B is going to give you a wider range. It's going to be more dynamic and kind of a more dramatic lighting scene. And as you saw in the reference I'm using, there are quite heavy shadows. So I am going to use a fuller range of, or a wider range of pencils, so that I'm able to, capture that. Typically what I would do is, actually I would draw, if I was in my own practice, I would probably, at this point with the underdrawing, I would now switch to charcoal pencils, which will just kind of be darker and more precise. But since I'm having you draw with pencils, I'll keep doing that so you can kind of see the process appropriately. And now I've gone through already, and just, you didn't need to watch it, I erased some of the kind of little thoughts I was making for you of, measuring parts or just some of that stuff. But I've tried not to do anything really substantial that you haven't been able to witness. Another thing I might do is I would also go through and kind of lighten some of these up, just to start from a solid, or a consistent point rather. But again, I'll just kind of go here with what I have, and we'll build up from there. So again, this part is going to be both refining or specifying forms a little bit more, but it's also going to be, I'm going to start to lay in the tone. So just as I was saying in the last video, kind of all throughout the process, I want to keep resolving issues and keep double checking that the solutions I've given are the correct ones. But I also want to keep working from a larger to smaller approach, right? So while I might start kind of thinking about the grapes a little bit more specifically here, I'm also going to start to lay in tone, but I'm going to do that in again, a looser, kind of more gestural way, where I just want to block things in a little bit without, making a fully rendered, perfectly modeled or rendered grape. I just want to get the value kind of studies, right? So in some of these parts where it's quite dark, as you saw or as you can see in the reference I've posted in the course module for you, I'm going to start by kind of establishing some of those things. So that's why here I actually refine some of these grapes to begin with, so that when I start to add in, suggest the value here a little bit, I'm working from a place where the tone, or where the tone is going to be in approximately the right parts there. So I'm trying to hold off on making any final decisions or final marks as long as possible, or instead I just want to start to block some things in a little bit here. And notice here I'm trying to avoid just putting a dark outline around something, even now as I'm kind of feeling it out and starting to put down a little bit of tone. I don't want to make any decisions that I can't unmake later. Because I'm just not ready to do that yet. I'm not totally sure I've gotten everything where it needs to be yet. So even as I start to put in some of these value relationships, I'm not kind of finishing them off. I'm just going to start suggesting some of them here and there. Right? Now you'll probably notice I'm using a mix of both kind of these cross contour hatchings where I'm drawing around the form as I'm doing here, but also doing just some straight hatching in other places. And students are often curious, and rightly so, kind of what the decision process is on when to do what and where. And there's not like a scientific answer for that, which I know is not what you're hoping for probably. But I suppose generally what I'm doing is, like here, when I'm indicating the cast shadow, here at least at the beginning, I'm just kind of doing it in this way, just a crosshatch here, just to indicate the tone, where some of these other things where I'm being a little bit more precise about things, or a little bit more, I don't know, confident in the shadows falling across it or the way the form is turning, then I'm using these kind of lines to describe how the grape is turning in that way, right? But it's also turning this way, right? So you can use them in both directions. But then again, when I'm just want to lay down a tone or a cast shadow, I'm doing kind of straight or, oblique diagonal lines there. So I've been using an 8B there, but I've been pressing pretty lightly on it. So even here when I go to a 2B, so I find it helpful to not necessarily start with the absolute darkest dark you think you're going to need, but to start on the darker end of things. And again, reserving the darkest dark, going really dark and really trying to make these shadows really deep and dark. It's a purple grape, but then also it's in the shadow there, or the shadow that's going to be behind here. I don't want to kind of make that, the 8B, like pressed, in a firm or even a hard way. I don't want to make that decision yet because I want to kind of build things up together. And so I don't want to get locked into the darkest dark being, me pressing down with the 8B as kind of as firmly as I can. So again, I'm going to lay in some tone here, but I'm not going to try and establish the darkest possible tone yet. because just like when I was building the underdrawing, I want to give myself the opportunity to change my mind or to make corrections. So I don't want to, again, like get married to a particular decision quite yet. I will include here, I'm just starting to build this up, so I will include some variations in the tone, certainly, or in the tones, but I'm not going to quite yet make the darkest part as dark as it's going to be. Kind of want to go in a kind of a middle step here, an intermediary step, rather. I was getting back to what I was saying a moment ago. Another thing students are often very curious about is, well, how do you know which direction to draw the lines, or how can you like decide, I'm going to curve this, I'm going to make these this way, I'm going to make these going this way, any of the different things you'll see me doing here, both in this and then in the next step. And it's unsatisfying, but my answer is generally, I don't know, you can just kind of see it. You can just kind of see which way the lines are supposed to be going. I know that is perhaps not the definitive scientific answer you want, but like when I'm looking at this pair here, and I'm looking at the shadow mask, I'm also kind of thinking about, okay, which way is it going? And I don't know, you just kind of develop an eye for, oh, this shadow is falling across it this way, so that's the way I'm going to indicate with my marks there, right? So again, I know it's not perhaps super helpful that the answer is, I don't know, you just do it, but it's one of those things that I think you kind of, as you're doing this and as you're doing these going forward, these type of observational drawings, you just start to develop an eye for it and start to be able to, I don't know, intuit or just kind of see which way they go. And of course, there's no kind of like right approach. There are some amazingly beautiful Da Vinci portrait drawings in which he's just doing everything in completely straight cross-hatching. He's showing all the forms in the cheeks and the woman's eyes and her lips and all that, but he's not drawing around the forms at all. He's just doing diagonal forms and layering diagonal strokes and layering them in a way that gives the proper tone in the form. So you don't even have to draw kind of around it. I don't know, perhaps from the Michelangelo or the sculptor's school, in which part of the kind of these curved contour lines are me thinking around the form as though, the same way I would when making a sculpture and wanting to kind of work around the form and indicate it that way. So, I don't know, there's no kind of definitive answer of you must use curved lines or you must just do straight cross-hatching as your wrist moves, but there's of course a spectrum of solutions you can employ, or that one can employ. So notice here as I was building this up on the back end here, I did do a little bit of when I was trying to make a nice crisp edge. And so I did, yes, make an outline or a contour there, but notice I didn't just do it around the whole thing. It varies, and it's just not an outline. I am drawing the edge of it, or trying to really kind of get that a nice crisp, sharp edge to it there. But I didn't just outline the pear. I was looking at the forms and how they move around, and it's not just like a sphere there, but there's kind of an undulation there in as the form of the pear is shifting there, right? So again, as we've talked about previously, it's not that you can't have outlines or that you can't draw the contour or something. You have to be kind of judicious with it and careful, because again, when you look at objects, you don't see a black outline going around things. You see the edge of them where the form stops, and then you see the negative space around them, but you don't see things with black outlines going around them. And so you shouldn't draw them that way, at least not if you want them to appear three-dimensional, because again, that's not how we see things in the three-dimensional world. So when your eye sees a drawing with a dark outline around it, it doesn't read it as a three-dimensional object, because that's not how three-dimensional objects look. So anyway, let me move on from this pear a little bit. I'm getting a little bit kind of fussy here as I'm talking to you about the kind of specifics of the value, when really I should be just blocking things in a bit more, but I don't know, I'm distracting myself with various insights and instructions for you. Anyway, so here, even for the picture here, right, you'll notice that it is white, but you don't have to look that closely to see there are a bunch of different values all across it, right? So I might even go back down to my 4H here and just give a little indication of where the edge of that cast shadow is. Now, even though I'm just giving that little bit there to the shadow, that's all of the shadow kind of pattern I'm going to outline, as it were. Oftentimes students will almost want to make like a paint by numbers, or just, look at it and say, all right, this shadow here runs like this, and almost kind of outline every kind of patch of shadow, and then kind of shade it in from there. But that is I don't think it's a super good strategy. I don't think it leads to good results, and so I don't think you should. I don't think you should do it. I don't think you should utilize that, even though I've just slightly kind of put that there because I wanted to. And actually, as I say that, I wanted to properly relate to those grapes. And so looking at it, I see actually it needs to be amended slightly or corrected slightly so as to relate to the grapes in a more accurate way. But I did that with a 4H pencil, so it'll be quite, it'll vanish here eventually. So I'm going to, again, just start to lay down a little bit of a tone in here, just so I can start to build up the value relationships between things. As you'll see, just like in the sphere drawing we did earlier, when I started to do the reflected light and the cast shadows, when I started to put in the cast shadow and that was next to the reflected light, you were able to see how light the reflected light was at first, where it looked quite dark when it was next to the white of the paper. But once I started to put in the cast shadow and it was pinched, the reflected light was then appearing between two darker areas, you could see how light it truly was. So again, that relationship of the values is an important thing to establish. And that's why I don't want to just decide on the blackest black right away. I want to kind of work from the middle and build out a little bit. So I want to kind of establish half tones or even mid-tones a little bit. Now I'm not just going to put a mid-tone over the whole thing, because then what have I done? But here you can see I'm doing a kind of range of mid-tones, and yes, this is going to need to be darker, quite a bit darker. But I want to start to build everything up together, so that then I can again make that those judgments and those comparisons. Oh, forgot the stem here of this bunch of grapes here. Let me block that in quickly. Another useful thing, or useful kind of trick, as it were, when you're working on your tone, both here at the beginning stages and later on, look at your setup or look at whatever it is you're drawing and squint at it. That process there of squinting at it kind of will blur out all the details and will instead allow you to see much more clearly the tonal relationships between the various parts of the composition in a way that I think you'll find quite helpful, and it is it's surprising how different things look when you do that, and that again allows you to kind of see, you know, because sometimes it's hard if I'm comparing how bright is this part here compared to something like this when they're so far away. But if I squint at it and I'm kind of blurring those details, I just see fields of value, and so that allows me to kind of more accurately judge the relative value of the gradations I'm making here in the modeling. So here, as I'm doing this, I can see that this part, as I'm adding more and more, is going to need to be quite a bit darker than it is presently. But it appeared dark to begin with until I started adding the other tones by which I'm now comparing it. So again, you want to kind of delay final decisions as long as possible and build up the drawing as a unit, as a single composition, right, where within it everything relates and makes sense to the other parts. Also, don't forget to kind of put a tone in the negative space, right? Because again, that is going to it's going to give your objects a context within which they exist, right? So as you saw with your sphere drawings, right, the not just drawing the sphere, but drawing the space around it allowed you to contrast some of those tones and shades, right? And so you were able to use that to make certain parts look darker or look lighter compared to what was around it. So part of this kind of step is also establishing the general value of the drawing, or the space around the objects is a better way of saying that. So again, I'm just going to lay in a little bit of tone here so that I can compare the decisions I'm making here with a more complete set of information, because you'll see how this changes when it compared to being against the white compared to even this kind of lighter mid-tone here, right? It's going to change how we see it and how dark it appears. As you can see here, how I'm building these tones up. So I'll probably stop recording here in a minute, and unlike last time, I'll probably do this a bit on my own, just so that I think you're getting the sense of the idea, and then it's just a matter of me applying it across the image. And then when we're ready for the next step, I'll start recording that demo again for you. But again, to kind of recap, this is very similar in the approach or the aim as the first step with the underdrawing, where what you want to do is establish and measure value relationships. Now again, I haven't really put in the full value range yet, but I want to start kind of working in both directions toward it, right? Rather than just like putting in my darkest dark right away, or where I think it's going to be. I mean, I can kind of see where it's going to be, right? Some of these are very dark in here, the grapes, the shadow here, right? All the, obviously the cast shadow down here. But rather than for, just for example, right, coming in here and just starting, oh, this is going to be the darkest part, and just like making the darkest line I possibly can, and then, you know, working out from that. I want to, again, I was kind of starting in the middle with a, or not even, kind of starting on one end with an all white page. But then when I started to do the gray, I want to have the gray so then I can push it towards the darks. And that'll also allow me to, where I don't push any more gray, that'll start to appear to lighten up because I'm making other parts darker. And so the parts that aren't being made darker will by contrast appear lighter, right? And then of course later on I can use this paper is actually slightly cream color, so I'll be able to at the very end when I want to do the highlight on the lip of the picture here on back here, you know, even on this front edge here, I can use some chalk and just add in touches of highlights here and there to again help push the value range even more, and so that the white of the page isn't the whitest part. Again, I've mentioned before, that's why I like to use tone paper typically in my own practice, because then the grays, the kind of mid gray is already there, it's the paper, and so then I can just push things darker or use chalk pencils to lighten things up a little bit. Right, so you can see as I come back to add more tone or more value, I'm able to get more subtlety in it. But I've just started by wanting to kind of, you know, I haven't done this part up here, but it's the same idea. So this is the type of stuff I'll do on my own here in a minute, rather than you know, recording, just kind of repeating the same step again and again, or the same process. You should have a decent idea, I think, at this point, kind of the approach or the mindset you should kind of have as you're working on these bits here. So anyway, this will be where you want to be at the end of this week, with your entire drawing kind of with the tone blocked in, right? So you'll be a little bit, well, you'll be further along than where I'm about to stop now, because you'll have done this all over the place, right? But yeah, I look forward to seeing what you made this week, and we'll see. Hopefully this will go well for you too. All right, thanks so much.